Okay, so that's just 20 seconds of me not being in the frame. Welcome back to Books to Huda. I am Sandy, and this is Vlogmas day 6. Yeah, this is part 2 of my reading journey, where after the split happens and my reading habits change and I become a different reader and read different things. So my parents, mostly exposed us to classics and things that are tried and true and mostly Victorian, and that's great, except it totally excludes about 90% of the writing in the world, probably. Everything that isn't written by a DWG, a dead white guy, or woman. What happened that changed my reading life is that I invited a friend over to stay the night, and just by chance, I hadn't really seen her in a while and we weren't really that close of friends, but she came over and she brought with her the manga series, maybe volumes 1 through 3 of Inuyasha, Rumiko Takahashi. There we go. And I loved it. Immediately. I did not know how to pronounce Japanese, however. The Tetsaiga, I called it the Tegusta. Like, terrible. But I fell in love with that series immediately and asked Laura to introduce me to other things, and she did, starting with Rumiko Takahashi's other series, popular at the time, Ranma 1/2. This is a newer, smaller version, but I loved that series too. It was silly and funny and unlike anything else I'd ever read in my life, and I think the only comics I had read up until this point were Betty and Veronica comics, which are pretty great, but, manga's a bit better. Then my parents, caught whiff of what I was reading, and my mom was not happy about there being nudity in these books. And it's not even, like, pornographic nudity, it's just like, oh, characters are nude because of the plot. Which, this happens in manga and anime. And my mom tried to stop me from reading it, but my dad was like, it's fine, So I think I was probably like 12 or 13 at this point anyway. And so I continued to read it and watch anime, and my fandom exploded from there into many other things. My first anime ever was Gundam Wing, which is great. I need to rewatch that. Major book that my friend Laura introduced me to, I've mentioned I'm sure before, is Terry Goodkeen's Wizard's First Rule. I remember reading this book in study hall and being absolutely enthralled. First sentence I've already read to you before. I mean, this book is massive. It was probably the biggest book I'd read other than Gone with the Wind up until this point in my life. I loved this book. I still love it. I read like 3 or 4 of them and then just kind of dropped off because they got weird. Yeah, this is a little beyond what someone at that age should have been reading. I'm glad that, my mom didn't see any nude people in this book. I'm sure there are some, but she did not know about it, so didn't try to keep me from reading it. From there, I went to the library, seeking out other types of fantasy novels, and that's when I found Time of the Twins, the first Dragonlance book in the Legends series, and fell in love with this dude here, solidifying my love of morally ambiguous mages / characters forever, i.e. Loki and Rumpelstiltskin on Once Upon a Time, just to mention a few. From here, or maybe after, I can't remember the chronology, but somewhere along the line, as it happens to most nerds in high school, I was introduced to Lord of the Rings. The films were also coming out at this time, but I made myself read the books first, which probably wasn't the best of choices. Considering the reader I was at that point, I did not have patience for a description of, what's it called? Agriculture, setting, scenery, that kind of thing. But this is definitely my kind of book now. Okay, so after this, then something really terrible happened in my family life, and my family and I moved to South Carolina to kind of restart. And in this time is when I found Twilight on a library bookshelf. Yes, this is when Twilight and I met 10 years ago. Yeah, we've talked a lot about Twilight. We don't need to visit that anymore. So I pretty much only read that when I was down there, because other than that, all of my free time was spent reading manga online and watching or on Host Club and playing video games. Such as Xenosaga, i.e. what is probably, I mean, Star Ocean 3 for PS2 is my favorite video game to play, probably of all time. But this, I don't even know why. I love Xenosaga so much. So much. Like, it's a great game. I really want them to do a HD collection of these games. I would buy that so fast because I want to replay them, but the PS2 is just so clunky and sad. And now I have PS4 and just make it already, please. I also, during that time, played Kingdom Hearts 2 on PS2, which, you know, this isn't really related to reading, but it's why I wasn't reading at the time. Some manga series that I was into, just to briefly mention, because I can't believe it, but I don't have any copies of Inuyasha manga. A series that my friends and I, my one friend and I, Sarah, she and I can quote basically the entire series of Fruits Basket, the English dub, like word for word. Especially episode 19. Should I do the leek soup rant? No. So, here is Fruits Basket Volume 1. I think I have up to Volume 12, and then I have a few volumes, and I should really buy it all, because it's really good. This is gonna be an interesting one to edit. After about 6 months, you know, we moved to where I live now. Then, my family and I lived together for a year, and then my parents moved to my childhood home again, you know, the city place, and I stayed here to finish my degree. Except then I got really lonely and hated living alone and moved back to live with my parents for a while. During that time, because I was just really, I pretty much just hated my life, you know, for like 3 years, because my boyfriend and I were long distance during that time. I didn't really, I mean, I had a couple friends, mostly the people I worked with, but life just sucked. So I did read a few things during that time. Mostly I read Twilight because that's when the movies were coming out, so each year I would reread them, except for like the last year, I don't know. And I didn't really have much time for reading because that's when Netflix came into my life. So I basically watched Netflix all the time. That's when I devoured Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Bones and Legend of the Seeker and just tons of shows. I did, however, during that time, read Pride and Prejudice. You know, on my break at work and just at home. I also read Jane Eyre for the first time. I read, I feel like I read some other important stuff, but those are the two big ones. I just didn't read because when I was not at work, I wanted to do something that didn't feel like work. And, you know, classics feel like work. But those were still really the only books that my parents accepted as acceptable. My fandom, like, my parents have finally sort of backed off now that I have a real job. But there's still a lot of shaming, you know, like lighthearted shaming for the, quote, crap that I spend my time reading, which I've just decided that I don't care. Whatever, it's fine. I enjoy it, and that's good enough for me. Then, after 3 years of hell, I quit and moved in with my boyfriend, and life has been much better. I think we've lived together 4 years now, and for the first 2 years we lived together, I was in school, so I basically read Victorian literature and old literature, which if you've seen my bookshelf tours, you've seen most of those, or my bookshelf tour, singular. That's when I got my first iPhone. This is my second iPhone. Let me go get my other iPhone for comparison. Okay, I'm back. So this is my first iPhone. I got an iPhone 4, and because of this little ditty, I just spent most of my time on Facebook and wasted it, you know. I just didn't read very much because I was having too much fun doing this and Netflix. But then, once I started grad school, I started reading for fun again, and then I discovered BookTube. And that really reignited my love for reading, along with Goodreads. Because the summer before grad school, I realized how much I wasn't reading anymore, except for school, and, you know, reading used to be such a huge part of my life. I loved reading. It was what I did for fun. I would read on the bus, I would read in bed, past my bedtime, you know, with a flashlight, all that. I just started reading things again for fun. I think the first book I read that I chronicled on Goodreads was Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. And then that just started me reading lots of things. Like, I'd never read memoir for fun. I read Bossy Pants. I read Mindy Kaling's first book. I read lots of Nora Ephron. And then I started reading YA because I heard about lots of titles on BookTube. And graduating from undergrad and then moving into grad school changed who I was as a reader more than anything else ever has in my life. And I'd already sort of been one, but I didn't really know. I became a feminist, officially, thanks to a Victorian women's seminar that I took. My master's degree, while there were a few classes in it that were just absolute crap and didn't do anything for me, mostly it was a very transformative time. Getting a master's in, well, I got mine in English literature, and it's the best thing I've ever done. I am so glad that I did it. It's turned me into who I am, and I love having the knowledge that I do now. I love having had the opportunity to study what I did and to push myself in the ways that grad school pushed me. I've kind of been thinking about whether or not I should do a PhD, and I wish I could. I'm not sure that it's possible right now. Just, there aren't any schools around me that have programs, / would I be good enough to get in, / would it be worth my time? What's the job market like? This is a conversation I need to have with my professors. That's pretty much been my reading journey. Grad school opened my mind to many, 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 many things. BookTube has opened up my love for books even more. I am so grateful that the community is so welcoming and friendly and fun, and it's just been such a great thing to come into my life, so thank you, everybody. And now I have to put all these books away. If you've done a reading journey video, or 2 or 3, I would love to watch them, because I'm sure all of us have different journeys, but we get to the same place of loving books if we're doing this. Draw the video to a close here, and say thank you for watching, and happy Vlogmas! Books to Huda! Because Kenshin and Tomoe forever!